Welcome back to Real Talk Behind the Badge. I'm Tim, a retired police sergeant from Massachusetts, but I now reside in South Carolina. This is our sixth podcast, and you can watch each one at realtalkbehindthebadge.com or on Facebook or YouTube. Today we're going to talk about how we can actually save the taxpayers millions of dollars on lawsuit payouts by using an alternate method of payouts. For today, I'm using South Carolina's payouts as examples, but I'm sure the recommendations I'm making would also be viable in most other states. So let's get going. I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this podcast, you've listened to the last one, number 5, the cost of defending police lawsuits, and where the money actually goes. If you haven't, I recommend you watch or listen to that one first. In 2024, the law firms in South Carolina were paid a total of almost $29 million by the Insurance Reserve Fund. There has to be another way. The millions of dollars the state actually paid out to law firms to defend lawsuits is enormous, leaving the victims with a fraction of the payout for each lawsuit. I called this what appears to be lawyer welfare sponsored by the state, which is guaranteed income to lawyers courtesy of the taxpayers. I also believe this is one reason they want to keep police officer academy training at a minimum. They want these lawsuits to keep coming. There are also always going to be a very small fraction of officers who use their authority illegally or on the cusp of legality, whether this is due to poor training, departmental policies of looking the other way, or other officers covering for an officer when they can. It can and will cause the public to disrespect and distrust the department when any of this occurs. But the fact remains that officers who abuse their powers often have most of the chips on their side and are hard to discipline. So what if you are one of the victims of those few officers, with otherwise good citizens not knowing what they can do to report those abuses and or be compensated for their cost, time, embarrassment, anxiety, etc.? They may feel helpless and have no alternatives to redress the situation other than to seek legal help and file a lawsuit, often costing the cities and towns large amounts of money. Now, while the majorities of police officers are very good at their jobs and are decent, fair, and well-intentioned human beings, this does not mean they don't make mistakes once in a while. We all do, we all have, and that is why I believe immunity for officers should prevail for most lawsuits. But then, even well-intentioned mistakes can cost citizens financially, or in the forms of mental anguish, embarrassment, and loss of freedom. Should a police department, a state, county, city, or town ignore the grievances that some victims endure and then basically tell them, "We're sorry this happened, we've handled it, now go away"? In most cases, the public doesn't seem to have any recourse for those who may have been illegally deprived of their civil, legal, or constitutional rights, or abused by an officer unless they file a lawsuit against the government entity, department, and or the officer. That also must change. Expecting the public to trust police departments to investigate themselves in itself will cause the public to not trust law enforcement, especially if they have witnessed such actions, heard from a friend or relative who's gone through it, or have past first-hand experience. There are also many videos on YouTube that shows officers violating citizens' rights, with the victim placing a complaint and the department later saying they investigated, but they didn't find any wrongdoing, when obviously there was. Here, they see the department investigating itself, protecting itself, and often don't believe they have a fair and balanced voice. Though many who have had their rights violated will not file a complaint directly with the county, city, or department because they either don't think will get anywhere, they're skeptical of the department investigating itself, they're scared of retribution, or they're passing through as a visitor or a traveler, and they don't expect the department will take it seriously. So they feel they don't have any choice but to seek legal help and file a lawsuit. Now you tell me, what is a citizen supposed to do when they have been detained, searched, or arrested illegally? They are embarrassed, stripped of their rights and their freedoms. If a person has been illegally abused or their rights violated, how are they made whole or compensated for those violations without going to court? Most often, they are not. And again, this leads to the public not trusting law enforcement. Additionally, some departments don't allow input from a complainant after a complaint has been made, or they don't follow through to the complainant with the investigative resolution. Some departments don't even have a way for a person to make a complaint, or they make it hard to file a complaint, or they have to file the complaint with the person they're complaining about, and this is not reasonable. It is also my opinion that in many cases the officer, personally, may not be at fault as he or she has not had proper training. If you take an officer who's been on the department for 20 years and has not had any updated training since the academy, how many laws have been enacted or updated? How many court decisions have there been in 20 years? This is not acceptable again, and in these cases, I place the blame squarely on the administration and the city, county, etc. Do they just figure sometimes it's cheaper to pay out higher insurance premiums or lawsuits than the cost to properly train all their officers? Now, I want to take a moment here and give a plug for our sponsor, American Heritage CBD. They only sell federally legal CBD, and you will find some of the lowest prices ever. And if you join their membership, you can get everything at 50% off. You just can't beat their pricing. So go to AmericanHeritageCBD.com and check them out and order now. Now, if a lawsuit is filed against the department, county, city, or officer, it may cost the Insurance Reserve Fund here in South Carolina or the city or county thousands to tens of thousands of dollars to defend, and it may take years to come to trial or mutual agreement, and maybe even longer if there's appeals. Even if the case is dismissed from a court on a technicality, or the court finds no fault on the officer, it is likely it will still cost the IRF or the government entity thousands and thousands to defend in legal fees if they are self-insured. If they are insured by an insurance fund, their insurance premiums will surely increase. If the department, city, county, or officer loses the court case, it can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the bad press it brings can be very harmful to the departments, the cities, and the counties and/or officers. Most government entities have insurance that will cover most damages awarded for many lawsuits, but there is still no insurance against bad publicity to the department. If we were to consider an alternate course of compensation for those whose complaints have been found valid, and I repeat, for those complaints that have been found valid, we can probably save many millions of taxpayer dollars a year. Instead of the state contracting outside law firms they pay millions of dollars annually to defend insurance claims, we believe the State Insurance Reserve Fund should maintain their own Office of Insurance Professionals that are trained to negotiate with victims who have had their claims substantiated and have indicated a willingness to consider compensation without hiring an attorney. Now let me be very clear here. When I say their claims have been substantiated, I mean they have been through an investigative procedure and found to be valid. Now, we'll go into that in another podcast, but for now, we are talking about claims that have been substantiated only. Let's take an actual case from the first quarter of 2024. The first false arrest case that was settled of the fiscal year was case number T130080020, emanating from Berkeley County. The alleged false arrest happened on June 20th, 2019. It was settled on September 11th, 2023, 4 years later. The case cost the Insurance Reserve Fund a total of $25,095.81. The complainant was awarded $10,000. The attorneys representing the Insurance Reserve Fund, which is the state, were given $15,095.81. That's more than 150% of the claimant's award. How much did the claimant actually get? Well, if she had an attorney, probably about $6,000 after her attorney fees of, I'm assuming, a standard of about 40%. That's $4,000. So the attorneys for both sides probably ended up with over $19,000, where the victim, the claimant, ends up with only $6,000. So to reiterate, the case cost the taxpayers $25,095.81, and the complainant got around $6,000, and it took over 4 years. Okay, so here's another one from the first quarter. That was case T130080020, emanating again from Berkeley County. The alleged false arrest happened on May 23rd, 2018. It was settled on September 29th, 2023, 5 years later. The case cost the Insurance Reserve Fund a total of $125,260.58. The complainant was awarded $66,250. The attorneys representing the Insurance Reserve Fund, the state, were given $59,010.58. How much did the claimant actually get? If she had an attorney, probably about $39,750 after her attorney fees. Again, I'm assuming a standard of about 40%, which would be about $26,500. So the attorneys for both sides probably ended up with over $85,000. Here's my fix. It is my belief that by using a state office of insurance professionals to negotiate fair compensation, victims will probably receive more funds, be paid faster, and will save taxpayers millions of dollars. That's a win-win situation for everyone, the taxpayers and the victims. If we were to take the statistics from the first quarter fiscal year 2024 of claims settled in South Carolina law enforcement, the total cost to the state insurance fund was $9,240,254. Of those payouts, $3,303,924 was paid to outside law firms to represent the insurance fund. $5,936,330 was paid to the claimants. If the claimants' attorneys received an average of 40% of the awards, the claimants would actually receive a total of about $3,361,798. If the amount the claimant actually received was the only amount the Insurance Reserve Fund had to pay out, that would be a savings of over $5.5 million of taxpayer funds for only 3 months of the year. I believe even more could be saved, as people wouldn't have to wait 2 to 7 years for a payout and would settle for even less. That is just the savings in the first quarter of that year, and just for law enforcement claims. What about all the hundreds of other claims? What would be the savings for the year? Maybe 20 million plus? Now here's the big question that makes this a win-win for everyone. If a state employee that negotiates on behalf of the IRF, Insurance Reserve Fund, comes to me before I hire an attorney and says, look, you stated you wanted to sue us for $50,000. I can show you what you will probably get out of that lawsuit based on past results. If you were to hire an attorney and sue us, you will probably end up with about $17,000. Now, that's after paying your attorney around 40% of any award and waiting for 2 to 7 years for a payout. I am authorized to write you a check right now for $15,000. Would I take it? You bet I would, and most others would also. This one case would save the taxpayer around $30,000. Now multiply that savings by 1,000. That saves the taxpayers around $30 million a year. So how do we get to this scenario where a complainant holds off hiring an attorney until they are offered a compensation deal? In my next podcast, we'll tackle that. The many details of how an alternate course of complaints I believe the public would perceive and trust as fair would work. So hit subscribe, share your thoughts, and let's keep this conversation going. This podcast is ground zero. I'm not here for theories or to hear myself talk. I want real answers and input from officers who've walked the walk. You, me, our brothers and sisters in blue, let's cut through the bullshit. Academics can keep talking all they want, but we have to build the cure. Join me at realtalkbehindthebadge.com. Drop your state, department, active or retired, what you've seen, and what solutions you have in mind. The answers are out there. We just need to find them. Let's hash out the hard fixes, stuff we can shove in front of lawmakers and make stick. We are just starting this journey, and we'd be pleased to have you join us. Your voices fuel this. If you've got answers you'd like to share or you want to do it live, let me know. Or if you'd like to be a guest on our show, please let me know. So go to realtalkbehindthebadge.com. That's realtalkbehindthebadge.com, and drop a comment or a rant. And if you can, drop a couple of bucks to help us out and keep this going. This podcast stuff ain't cheap or easy on a cop retiree's salary. And you can view our podcast on YouTube, Real Talk Behind the Badge, as we make them. If you hit subscribe, you'll be notified of each podcast. Please hit the like button also. We're also on Facebook at Real Talk Behind the Badge or at realtalkbehindthebadge.com, where you can also view our podcast. Thanks to all our brothers and sisters behind the badge. Keep it going and we'll get this fixed. Stay safe. This is Real Talk signing off until next time. Thank you and be careful out there.